Expectations?
No, to test how low the IQ was. Frankly, what can I say? I do want to, let me tell you something. We have a big chassid, we're a brand new chassid. Brad just got married. Here we go. Tosfos, not the Gemara, asks a question, a very famous question. How could Esther do Gila rice with the king? All right? Tosfos asks this question. How could Esther do Gila rice with the king? Is it one of the big three? Okay? Yehargel Yavor. So how does she justify it? Now, the famous answer that she's Karka Olam is only said in the Gemara about the Farhesia. How could she do something that everybody knew about, in which case you don't have all the mitzvahs are also, right? You can't, there's when we say the big three, which means the 97% of everything else you can do the Aveira, that only means when it's not Farhesia. But if it's Farhesia, even to change the shoelaces, you know what to do. So, again, Tosfos famously asked, and very well known, how could Esther do Gila rise with the king? Isn't that Yehargel Yavor? The answer that she was Karka Olam only takes care of the problem of the Farhesia, but not the problem of Gila Rayas. Okay? So, how could she do that? Actually, it's not so simple. Tosfos famously gives two opinions as far as Esther and Gila Rayas is concerned. So, as far as the specific Isser, that she's not allowed to have Bia with the king, which is a major component of the story. So, there's two famous answers, one of which everybody remembers, the other one they don't. One is Rabbeinu Tam, and the other one is Rabbi Yitzchak ben Mordechai de Rivom, who I mentioned the other day in a podcast. Rabbeinu Tam famously says, Zir Masusim Zir Masham, which means it's a racist answer, that it wasn't really a Gila Rayas, because for which one must be Yehargel Yavor, because the guy doesn't count. Zir Masusim Zir Masham, it's like a behemoth, you understand? And having to be with a behemoth. In other words, it's not okay, but it's not Yehargel Yavor. That's the point. That's the famous answer. That's the famous answer of Rabbeinu Tam. It reminds one of the ruling.
Can I call it in?
I'm always afraid of this thing. I can't contradict him now because he might be armed. You know? He might be armed. Okay.
There are minor issues.
Yeah, I understand that. So anyway, the bottom line is, it reminds you of the ruling that if a married woman has a child by a guy, the kid's not a monster. Which we don't. Right? Yeah. What does this rule sound like? It sounds like a Nafri doesn't count. Actually, there's this is a very well-known Tosfos, where it says Rabbeinu Tam was willing to posture in this way in the case of a girl who converted. So in other words, she was married to a Jew, she ran off with a Deutsche lover, then she returned to Judaism, and the original Jewish husband divorced her, and she was allowed to marry the guy. Rabbeinu Tam let her marry the guy, even though we have a mitzvah of Echel Abal v'Echel Abo, she's not supposed to marry the guy, but he let her do it anyway, based on the fact it didn't count as Zir Muslim. It's not like she had the din of Echel Abal v'Echel Abo is only when it's a Jew. Okay? The very liberal ruling. It's very famous that other Rishonim, like the king of Paris, did give this heter, but for a different reason. They said a Gershon is carried to Chinola dummy. So it's like a brand new case. They don't want to give Rabbeinu Tam's reason, but I don't want to get it too far off the track. To Rivam, here's where I want to go. To Rivam was Yitzchak ben Mordechai, that's why I did the podcast on last week, attacked this ruling, meaning against Rabbeinu Tam, even though he was a student of his, by quoting the famous Gemara, where Queen Esther says herself, Kasher avadati avodati. Right? That Shemchol Yom Arak Shabba'onis V'Achta B'Rotza. Kishem Shabbatin Meisaba Kin Avavi Mechov. That Queen Esther was complaining. She says, I have to do this now to come on to the king because it's necessary to save the Jewish people. But once I do that, I'll be also to you, my husband Mordechai. Why? If he's a guy and he's a Muslim, it shouldn't matter. This is the famous kasha, right? Against Rabbeinu Tam. Esther is saying she's keeping any matter other than Karka Olam. Then her bia with the king would make her also to her husband Mordechai, which proves it's not Zir Masud. Zir Masud. It's a well-known thing. Now, here's the point. This led me to think, Okay?
The king is good. The king is good. L'chaim. L'chaim.
I've never been where?
I can lead a horse to water.
Now we know why. Anyway.
Your jokes are plummeting like Biden's.
Oh, yeah. We even have, not only with Johnny Carson, we have Ed McMahon now. Anyhow, hold on. But anyway, that's a well-known kasha. It's not mine. That's what Tosha says. But there's no answer from Rabbeinu Tam. That's all I'm going to say. There's no answer from Rabbeinu Tam brought in the Tosha. So it leads you to the question. Rabbeinu Tam not stupid. So what he said, he knows the Gemara. The Queen Esther says, "I'm also to my husband now as a result of my relations with the king and so forth." So how could he say he's a Muslim? No, what does Rabbeinu Tam say to that? The Tosha doesn't give you an answer. It's a very famous problem. All right. What does he do with kasher avodati avodati? He has to learn it differently. But what else does it mean when it says kashem she'ovad mimcha, ovad mimbeis ava kam ovad mimcha? Then now that I'm going to go with the king, so I'll be usher to you, my husband. If it's your Muslim, it's a Muslim. If it doesn't count, then why did he say that? What would Rabbeinu Tam say? So, what did you say? That what?
They didn't mean that they were awesome.
That was an interview.
It's your day job.
Anyway, Rabbeinu Tam could interpret. Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam could interpret the phrase to mean something other than Asher Balabal. He has to. Right, he has to. When it says Kishem Shobim Mimcha, I won't be allowed to you anymore, it's going to mean something else. He could, for example, interpret it to mean Pasha. Kishem Kasher Avarati Avarati. Esther was a Hebrew. She was going in there, she figured I'm going to get killed. She didn't know the answer that the king would extend the thing to her. Usually you walk in without permission, you get killed. So she says, in other words, you don't have to give up. What does Kasher Avarati Avarati mean? I'm taking my, listen. She was a hero. She took a big chance. That's why she freaked out. She said, the Stalkum and Ashkina, she walked in there, she's scared out of her mind. She did it, and it was a happy ending. So you don't have to learn, the Tosas way. Right? Just as I lost my parents in infancy, and I suffered the tragedy of being an orphan, because we say, her father died and mother died by the time she was born. Mother died in childbirth.
Isn't the problem that he has to explain the Gemara's interpretation?
So wait a minute. All the Gemara says is Kishem she'avarti mibeis ava came over mimcha. Okay.
So you have to explain Ovad Mimcha.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
So I'll now lose my husband to she'avarti avarti, meaning I'll get killed. This has nothing to do with contradicting Zirmazim.
Okay.
Or it could be, as per the Manos Halevi, which I saw this week, that I'll sleep with the kingdom now and then Ego, because it says she was like that, which she said, which will gross you out so much. In other words, she's basically saying, it's a very frummy interpretation, but this is the Manos Halevi, and that is, he said like this, he said, until now she always was careful about Nish, Yovelis, Yoshevis, and if Mordecai will know, this is what Manos Halevi does not mean, that she's doing this, he'll be so turned off he won't have anything to do with her, right? Yeah, and wait a minute, and this may gross you out, and you won't have anything to do with me. This is my interpretation of Manos Halevi. That's what I think it means. But again, it doesn't contradict Zirmos and Sarasa. After I wrote this, I discovered that there is indeed a machlokas achronim concerning the question of whether a Jewish woman Zanita is chayav kares if she has been with a Gentile. Was this interesting? But it's from the 19th century. A disagreement here between two big Polish gedolim. The Chalkas Yov on the one hand, and I have the sources here, holds that she's not chayav kares, but the Minchas and Ramosha finds,
Said about the minchas.
I'll start again. The Chalkas Yov says she's not chayav kares, but the Minchas, right? They live near each other. Chalkas Yom and Chasneh, and what do you call? And Digris Moshe, you heard of him? They all say that she is. This I didn't know the answer. I looked around, I couldn't find it. I asked Abba Tzvi Naaman. He made a search up and down, and he actually found a book called Laws of Dealing with Baal Tshuvas or some name like that. And the guy actually discussed the full business, so had to name it. So Esther anyway could be saying Kavshar Avarati Avarati, meaning now B'chayim Kares. And that would be the answer of any time. No, you don't have to learn. It says, I'll be also to you. the fact that she's doing a big with a cover means she'll lose on haba, so to speak. Okay?
So he's not chayav kares if she's a nido and she's
The reverse of what you said. If you go like Moshe Feinstein,
So then-
or the Moshe Feinstein, then she is.
So then why would the Gemara say she's nevad only to his house?
No, she was talking about her husband. She was talking to Mordechai. Kasher Barati Avarti. That's who she's talking to.
But she'll be nevad to
The loud gets in the Gemara is, I was lost to my father's house, and I'll be lost to you.
I thought the Muslim says that the Goyim are
He mentions that, but that's not taking the kuda. Under my opinion.
Again,
But it's not. No. It's not because it says, well, he's wrong, but look, because no. It's a famous trope in rabbinic
That's wrong, Rabbi.
Oh, it's a famous trope in rabbinic literature that since Rivka said to her father, when he's looking for the trophin, I can't get up, he's there for Noshim Lee, so you keep over here, and even those who are not Jewish, still help in the union of get up in general.
Only does that version specifically, Mayor and his sister-in-law, and she made herself always look like.
That was about the Romans. I thought you were into something really cool for a second. I thought he was, and I was shocked. Unfortunately, I wasn't. I thought, no, you don't know what I'm talking about. Right. Shai Sekunda, who's now a professor somewhere, has done his dissertation and all of his academic stuff on the theory that all the helpless needed that Jews got from the Zoroastrians. Understand? Well, he did homework on it. I'm just saying that's his Kiddush. That's where I thought you were going. In which case, I would have said, yeah. But anyway, that's an academic point. Now, anyway, so Esther and Mordechai may have held like Rabbeinu Tam, especially B'Shas Adchak. So in other words, Zirma, Susan, Zirmazim, and Shabbat doesn't mean anything. And so there was no intrinsic problem with the king. This is a case of Yavar Val Yaharig, not Yavar Val Yavar. And let's put it this way. If you go like the other guy, she was willing to suffer chorus. I mean, and she really was a hero. Okay, Kasher Avarati Avarati. And she was, that's what they say. But she said, this is going according to Chalak. So she was saying, I'll be chayav chorus, I'm willing to do it. She was a heroine. The problem was that the parhesia aspect. That's where the Gemara is coming from. It was public knowledge it was a Chil Hashem, and as soon as you have a Chil Hashem, then that automatically tributes to Hark Yavor. That's why it is that problem the Gemara addresses and says Karka Olam Shani and what do you call it? Hana Sasma Shani. As long as she was like Karka Olam, what's that? Nobody knows. I'll get to that in a second. You're on the right track. He's on the right track. Okay. Now, let's take a. But I hope I made myself clear. If I didn't, heck with you. Now, let's take a look at the problem. I can't deal with it. I can't deal with everybody. Now, let's take a look at the problem of B'Farhesia. That's exactly what Mark Henman said. You're exactly right. How's it public knowledge? It means B'Farhesia means the Jews, quote unquote. At least 10 of them knew about Esther living with the king. But who knew that? Here we run into a gap in the narrative of Purim, in my opinion. Okay, we run into a gap. All the Jews in Shushan knew? I mean, is that really true? Esther B'Farhesia, I mean, everybody knew that there's this Jewish lady who was carried off and is in the harem and this and that, she's now the favorite. I mean, is that true? If so, how was she able to keep her true identity over the course of many years? A secret from the king and later from home. After all, how could word not have gotten back to the palace? Especially, the Gemara says, the king was obsessed with finding out who she was. The Gemara has a whole bunch of cases where he went to great lengths. He even gave a tax break, like Ira, in order to stimulate that would get her to confess who she was.
I was tax because
thought you wanted a tax break.
Elbor had not collecting taxes. I'm not giving breaks.
Okay.
The Jewish people are known for being very discreet. Didn't they keep a record that she was collected from Mordecai's house?
We'll get to that. I'm trying to, no, your questions are all correct. I'm trying to fill in the gap as best as I can. I'm simply pointing out what we all know, which is there's a weird part of the narrative that, Esther is a Jewish girl, she was married to Mordecai, or it doesn't say she was married to Mordecai, and not all Rishonim hold that she's married to Mordecai. It's clear about that. It doesn't say that she's married to Mordecai. They were cousins, by the way, not uncle and niece. Agreed? They were cousins. Bosco, right?
Uncle.
Mm-hmm. Everybody always thinks it's an uncle, and then he says that they're cousins. And hold on.
I were not kissing cousins.
Well, I don't know about that. It may be that they were. It may be that the end of the kissing cousins. Although, as I mentioned the other day, there's a heck of an age gap between them.
Yes.
How old is Mordecai? How old is Mordecai at the time of our story?
That's a 90.
90 or 18?
Older even.
Well, that's a famous joke, right?
Wait a second. Hold on for a second. It says Mordecai. How much earlier is that than our? Is it 70, 80 years?
Well,
And wait a minute. And wait a second. Wait a minute. It's not less than 70.
They're only exiled 70. How could it be 70?
First of all, I'm going to answer you. He says, no, Mark's raising a good question. How exactly is it 70? Mordecai is not from round 2, he's from round 1. That before they destroyed the base of Mesh 10 years earlier is the Gauls Yechanya. And the Megillah goes to the point of making that point.
So explain how.
So, is it 70 or 80 years earlier? And Mordecai was a born man. He was a guy in the Sanhedrin. You tell me he was like a Vilna Gaon type, and at 18 or 20 he was already hot stuff. But still, right? Yeah, exactly. That's my point. By the way, that's not a diuk. I mean, that's the plain, right? So people don't remember that. And I mentioned yesterday also, there's a medicine in the Hillam, I think from last night, that says that when Esther was a baby, Mordecai's wife nursed her.
Well, it's a little weird they asked about Purim.
I'm not saying it's a little weird.
What's the interest in Shemesh?
Well, no, if you went a little bit weird, there's a medrash in Noah.
well, no.
There's a wait a second. Wait a minute.
Woody Allen was innocent.
There's a medrash rabbah in Parshas Noach, which I remember, which says that Mordecai nursed her. And he grew Shadayim, and people laughed when he said that interpretation, and the guy screamed at the audience. Okay, so listen, I find that a little bit weird, but
Stranger things have happened in 632.
no, I wouldn't say stranger things.
2022, Rabbi.
That pretty much takes it. Right, in 2022.
Warren
Right.
says on a guy like that, that he would have been better off dead.
Hormone treatments.
Look, I'm going to tell you something. There were times, in this day and age, we have no problem. There were times he identified as this.
Who's that?
Other times he identified as that. But whatever the case is, there certainly was a big age difference. That's all I'm saying. It's if I heal man is how that's raised her, So think about that.
When was she born? You know?
It's not clear, but she must be young. She's
She was at least 4. She's about 4.
I know there are opinions in the more about that, but the Pasha shot is that she was. Yeah, that's one opinion. Everybody zeroes into that. Guys are like terrible. They always go for the worst interpretation. The reason I say the worst interpretation, the pasuk says she was Tovas Merabi Fas Torah, right? Some person in the Gemara says, "Oh, she's Yirak Rubis." All right. At the end of the day, that's not the pasuk shot. The king didn't fall for her because she was, Rashi over there says she was ugly, but she had a kushal chesed.
Right.
It's exactly. Puck. It's exactly puck. What am I talking about?
Midnight Time.
No, Midsummer Night's Dream. Remember, he put the dust on him, and then you fall for her.
Look, after having...
Rashi says the word, put a dust on her or something. I'm serious. Okay, then it's a push shot.
No. But after having a wife with a tail, that's you're because it's not so bad.
First of all, the wife had a tail for a grand total of 6. First of all, you have to understand, the competition shows you he never met a Beis before. She grew up in the palace. Mordecai lived, she was the first girl in the beauty contest when they gave her part, she didn't bite it. They brought hillbillies from all over the Persian Empire. If they got to put you through 12 months of perfume, that's all. I'm just telling you. Shisha Barashim Shem Amar. Shisha Barashim Baba Summit. He got a lot of Reconstructive work. Say what you want. You got a lot of repair work to do over there. That's why he says, as soon as he met Esther. No, what does it say? As soon as he saw Esther, he fast tracked her. That's the puncher's job. Because he said, we do.
I can see your eyes. What, if you didn't have a tail, you were good looking?
You remind me.
Don't say it. Say it.
You remind me. I once saw on the CNN long ago a speech by who was Bill Clinton's campaign manager? Remind me.
The guy from Louisiana.
The guy from Louisiana. What's his name?
James Carville.
That's it, yeah. The James Carville was giving a speech, and in the speech he said like this: "Guys, I'm from Louisiana. I'm from the backwoods of Louisiana. I mean the way backwoods of Louisiana. Where I come from, the number one pickup line is, that's a nice tooth you got there." So, when Queen Esther showed up, you know what I mean? She didn't want it, right, exactly. She had 2 eyes and everything. She had a full set of teeth. It says over there, because Haggai saw her, Lopik shot the bar, he immediately moved her to the front of the line. Let's put it this way. You want a Purim interpretation? That's how Hashem set it up. She didn't have much of a competition. You get it?
Well,
she didn't have much of a competition.
This is a Cinderella story, maybe.
Say what you want to say. I'm going to tell you something. You want the Cinderella aspect? She had 7 girls. This is really a Beis Yaakov Cinderella story.
Yeah.
This is really a Beis Yaakov story. It says, she gave her 7 girls. The Gemara says those 7 girls were Beis Yaakov girls that Vashti tortured. Yes. That she made them work naked on Shabbos. Right. She knew that would really freak him out. So you can imagine these 7 girls who were living a terrible time. And then suddenly Vashti made her own move, she gets killed. They don't know who the next girl is. Then they get this new queen they never saw before, and she doesn't know who she is. They can see. BJJ. You can just tell.
Oh, they can.
You understand? And by the time it's over, they have a conspiracy. Because Esther says at the end, Sumo, you see? So for them was a Yeshua, they couldn't believe their luck. They could have gotten another Rashi. You get it? And they could have been bigger. They got big luck over there, but obviously it's like this. We got all shut up over here. You see? So that way they could keep Shabbos 3 months and all that, by themselves without calling attention to it. It's a story within a story. But there's a lot of things like that. But anyway, to try to get back to this, how could she keep her identity, especially when the king was obsessed with trying to find out who she was? He gave a tax break, he gave presents to the princess, also, on the other hand, wait a second. On the other hand, how could this not be known to the Jewish community in Shushan? It's another gap.
How big was Shushan?
Wait a minute. If Esther was the wife of Mordecai, she wouldn't have been snatched by the king's girl snatchers. They were supposed to snatch basilos, unmarried girls. Basilos, not wait a minute. Unmarried girls, not married women.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that the story? If a mistake was made, why didn't Mordecai tell the guys, excuse me, this one's a married woman? Okay? And in spite of everything, bureaucratically, they took Esther away, which is possible, especially in Iran. It's possible. My goodness, what a big scandal for the Jewish community. The wife of the Golden Home was just taken by the Goyish king. The wife of the Alter Rebbe, if you prefer. In other words, the hackers and the yackers and the back of Shul and in the mikvah and in the internet, my goodness, you see with world news, how could this be kept a secret? Right? I'm just saying, how could it be kept a secret and you tell me, ain't Esther Magen? How could it not be known? That's a general question in the narrative, in my opinion. Right? It had to go viral. How could it be that the Jews knew that Esther was Jewish, but no one else in the palace found that? And don't tell me the Jews kept their mouth shut.
Ovadia.
Don't tell me the Jews kept their mouth shut.
Ovadia.
Yeah, for a short time, with 50 guys in the cave. He says,
2 days.
yeah, this is 5 years. He says, and don't tell me that they, but it's a good, that's a good two show.
Was Ovadia there? That one was there?
It's unclear.
But if he was born a guy, he would not keep a secret.
He would, but no, but they say that everybody in the audience knew and they kept quiet. That's the, it was a name. But wait a minute. Don't tell me the Jews know how to keep their mouth shut. First of all, Jews don't know how to keep their mouth shut. Cut the ball, right? Number one. Number two, Tosfos famously says, how come Mordecai simply didn't divorce his wife in order to get around the problem of HSE? Right? In other words, why did he do that? And Tosfos very famously answered that really he could have done that, but he was afraid if he divorced her, the witnesses would blab, and the word of his true relationship to Esther, which he wanted to keep hidden from public knowledge, would get out. So you have it black and white. Tosfos, yeah. The Noda B'Yehuda and the Rasha have a whole shake, if you want to go that way, that when Mordecai would remarry her later, the news would get out. So in other words, the Rasha says he did divorce her because there is a certain way to do a get. Rabbi Goldberg here says it's not a get. There's midaraisa. There's a way to do a get because of the Saviyah. So you could. What?
It seems that there are a lot of
No, but you need 80
All I'm saying is, if I can, it's a beferish Rishonim, that once you do a marriage or a divorce, it gets out. That's the point. So, first of all, the eight will talk. They'll get.
Doesn't work.
They'll talk. And it's a cold. Eight of them are cold. Hi, you tell me these two guys won't talk? They will. He'll tell his wife, don't tell anybody else.
Oh, now I know.
Let's go on. So I repeat, how could the snatching of Esther take place without it being public knowledge? And if it was, how would it have not leaked out? It doesn't make any sense. In order to try to make sense out of this, I want to suggest, at least this year, that this is how the story goes. Okay? This is how the story goes. Mordecai was an unusual person. He lived by... Wait a minute. Mordecai was an unusual person. He lived by himself in Shushan Abira and not in Shushan proper, as Yonas Ignatius points out. That's his whole thing of Ish Yehudi Hayim Shushan Abira. There was a grand total of one Jew living in Shushan Abira, as Chazal say Ish Yehudi, Ish Yechidi. Now, when they say Ish Yechidi, it means that he was unusual in rejecting idolatry. But it can also mean he was a loner. That's what Yonas Ignatius says, not me. But he was a loner. Only later, when the tremendous, what I call Holocaust threat of Haman arises, and at an Esther's command, only then does Mordecai cross the river to join with the Jewish community of Shushan proper. But before that, he lived apart from the other Jews. Why? It's pretty clear to me, he disapproved of them. Mordecai was a person described as Shagolo Me'atzmo, right? Who wanted to... Right? Who went into voluntary exile long before the time of Yochanan. Why? Why did he do that? He clearly didn't like how the Jews were acting. He perceived he had no influence on them. He probably feared they might influence him. So he kept away. So Golo Miasmo is a personality trait. It's not just an incident that happened in his life. You have to understand, at the end of the Bayis Rishon, things were pretty bad. Just read the book of Jeremiah. He wanted to run all the time. God keeps telling him, I don't permit you to run. If you look at Jeremiah, he's always saying, I want to go here. He tries to go to Babel, by the way, and Hashem tells him to go back. Okay, so this is the tragedy of Yirmiyahu, that Hashem is actually talking to him and saying, get back in the arena. I don't know if you remember, you probably don't, when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Jeremiah said to the people, see, look what happened as a result of your idolatry. And they said, no, ever since we stopped worshiping the Queen of Heaven, everything's screwed up. In other words, they totally misinterpreted the Purim Beis Hamikdash, and so he held his hands up. It was impossible for him to persuade the Jews of the folly of idolatry. You understand? And this was his whole purpose in life. So he was a big failure, and God told him at the very beginning, tough luck. You have to go and do what I tell you to do, even if they'll beat you up.
Rabbi Katz, what is Queen of Heaven?
The name of an idol.
And a great band.
Right? It was named Malchus Shemayim was like a constellation. It was
the energy or something?
It was covered
Oh,
band.
dog. Oh, dog.
I don't know. It was an idol. Anyway, the point's like this. So Mordecai didn't want to have anything to do with that. And so, basically, when he moved to Babel and eventually moved to Shushan, he stayed away from the Jews. Perhaps he disagreed with the over-lenient attitude of Sanhedrin about the Shakal Atzam with Nebuchadnezzar. There was a big thing over there when they should bow down to the idol. They all did, and he didn't agree with that. I'll say it again. Sanhedrin said he could, only Canaan and Shalom Zayis didn't, which happened the case in the time of Haman also. That's what Rashbi says, because Haman wore an idol and they all bowed down to him. Mordecai didn't bow down, the others did. Unable, as was true of Elizabeth Hyrcanus, to persuade, unable to agree with the majority, but not wishing to be a Zakin Mamre, be put in Cherem, he simply banished himself. After all, remember, there was no such thing as davening at that time, Tefillah B'tzibur. You didn't have to live in a Jewish neighborhood. The only reason all of us live,
Prices were too high.
only reason we live, or I won't say the only reason, but the main reason we live in a Jewish neighborhood is because you got to be near a Jewish institution. You got to be near a shul, correct? Otherwise, I got news for you. You know as well as I do, the prices in this neighborhood are crazy. You go somewhere else, the same house is half the price, or if not less.
Yes.
I won't say Randallstown. I would say Randallstown, but it's also out there in whateverville. That's what I hear. So anyhow, whatever the case is. He didn't, although the various midrashic sources are not necessarily consistent with each other, the story that he was in charge of the kashrus at the king's banquet and warned the Jews not to attend, which warning they disregarded, okay? We saw yesterday in Shul in the Yonas and Abshus. What is the literal meaning of, according to Abshus, what is the literal meaning of Ekeli and Mikeli Shonim? See, you and I always learn like this, that they use the Kalim at the base of Mikdash. But Yonas and Abshus is like this. No, it was under strict kashrus at the start K. Kalim and they say you can eat here. We have specially marked kosher dishes. Is that a good part? Right? Now, of course, they still shouldn't have gone there because he had in mind to mess them up. But the people didn't listen. This merely confirmed Mordecai's lack of influence over his fellow Jews. So he lived by himself in Shushan Aber with Esther. Thus, it's conceivable no one knew that she had been snatched. As to Esther, while it seems the Jews must have known that he was married to his cousin, because if it's true that he was married to Mordecai, we say Adam Yesh Lakol, but she was known as Hadassah. That was not her name. Her name was not Esther. She was some girl named Hadassah. The name Esther is indeed a Gaisha name. It's a double entendre, isn't it? It's a wonderful. Either Ishtar is the god of Babylonia, goddess of Babylonia, and Esther also means hidden, right? So it's a nice name. So all they knew is there's some new queen named Mysterious Esther or Ishtar. So they didn't know that the new Queen Esther was identical with Hadassah, and thus it was that none in Shushan proper, not in Shushan Abira, which was across the river. I can't find over here, somewhere is the Landy book, where he does...
I just bought it.
Okay, so...
There's a river and
I hope by that you don't mean he took it from me. The Landy book, and we all knew it. First of all, David Ezra says it, and Yabeshitz makes a big deal out of it, and it happens to be historically true. Meaning that at the royal court of ancient Susa, the royal compound, like the Forbidden City in Beijing, is separate from the other compound. And many places in Europe it's like that. Not in London, but in many places it's like that. It's cut off by a moat. Whatever the case is, they knew that she was this new queen, but nobody in Shushan proper knew that Esther is Hadassah, so the secret never got out. That's the best way I can figure out. The secret did not leak. Now, I want to remind you, they were married for 5 years before Haman showed up. That's a long time to keep a secret.
How do you know 5 years before? Oh, before Haman. I'm sorry. Okay, never
5
mind.
years.
No, not 5 years. 5 years before the Purim story. Haman was in already earlier. The story itself of the attempt to wipe out the Jews is in the 12th year of the king.
Yeah.
You don't know how long she was married to Mordecai before.
You know,
I didn't say that. I'm talking about.
Okay, that's something I
she got married
understood.
to Jewish in year 7, right? Year 7.
She kept it. Let's put it this way: her ID, which was a hot topic of discussion, was kept secret for 5 years, even though the king was always championing her, and even though Kol Echad Nid Masalo to Umasa, that everybody thought she's one of ours. The Greeks said like this: that girl is a Greek.
Mama, she's a Greek girl for sure.
And the Arab says she's Arab, and the Roman says she's a Roman.
Except Achashverosh, right?
Yeah, he drove him crazy, right? Yeah. So, if this is so, What does the Gemara mean when Esther was before Heskia? That's what Mark Kelman just asked. Who was there? It was just Mordecai and Esther, and nobody knows who she is. So where do you come up with before Heskia? For Heskia means you need 10 Jews. Where do you do that from, right? That's what makes it a Chil Hashem, that there are 10 Jews who know about it. But in our case, only Mordecai and Esther knew, so how is it before Heskia? To answer this question, you can either go the cute Vort road or the more deeply thoughtful road. Let's first go to the cute Vort road, okay? And that is, you can say actually there were 10 who knew. Listen closely. You got Mordecai, that's one. Wait a minute, you got Mordecai, that's one. Got the 7 girls.
They count?
Hold on, just hold on, right? Just hold your horses. You got Mordecai, that's one. The 7 girls makes 8. Daniel and Hasach, if they're identical, makes 9. And who would be the 10th? Esther. Now hold on for a second, therefore you have 10. But this is not so pashut. The Gemara says you need 10 persons, but maybe only males and not females. Maybe, moreover, is the Avaryan one of the 10?
And his son was killed.
Okay? Remember, yeah, but until then he knew.
But not at the time.
No, but Esther Vanessa, how could she go for 5 years?
Oh, you're talking about you would cook on.
That's the Pashup Shah.
The Gemara says that the second meal was that they shouldn't say we have a sister in the.
Hold
so
on,
it
it's
sounds
all
like they
coming.
knew.
It's all coming. It's all coming. Have to tie all the hands together. Now, again, you need 10 persons. Maybe it's males and not females. Maybe the sinner is not one of the 10. Remember, really, he or she is not really doing a sinner. It's Yahar Bal Yavar. I'm sorry, it's Yavar Bal Yahar. From Karka Olam point of view, as we said before, you can do it. So it's not really a sin. Only if it was done before Hesi would it be a sin. So if not for the fact that it's public, so maybe she herself, or he, or whatever, in this case she, could count as one of 10. This is a question among the Italian Achronim. In the Dvar Shmuel, who is one of my favorites, Shmuel Abahab of Venice, household name, and the Zera Emes, who I just did a podcast on in Modena.
Who's that? Zaramas?
Yishmael Cohen. These are famous
Italians.
The Zera is being reprinted as we speak. Right? I'm serious. He didn't have children, so he called the name of the savior Zera Emes. He was a great Gaon. He was on the Napoleon Sanhedrin business and all that stuff, you know. He didn't go, but he was summoned. He was a big Kosek. Anyway, let's put it this way. Without giving you all the details, you can all look this up if you really care for. In the Dark Yeshuva, Kufna Zayin in Yordea. That's for the Simcha Chavdal. So, anyway, there are opinions that say you can count Noshim and Avodim and Ketanim.
To make Farhesia.
That's right.
Okay?
No, not.
I'll start again. No. Noshim, Avodim, Ketanim. And the Avaryan.
We're not going. No.
Correct. That's correct. Not going. No. Hold on for a second. Plus, there's always another way to go. I'm not going to do it. Plus the perpetrator, meaning Esther.
Right.
So, but for Hester really means in front of 9, according to these Achronim.
But
Okay.
you're trying to justify now the idea that even as Karka Olam, because it's Farhesia, then she's not. Karka Olam means I'm not doing anything.
I understand that, but it's not so simple that Karka Olam justifies Gila Rayas.
You're not justifying anything, you're not doing anything.
I
Karka
understand,
Olam means
maybe
I'm
you
not
have
doing
to,
anything.
maybe you have to die.
You're not doing anything. What do you
So
want
hold
me
on,
to do?
that's the Ramban. Hold on for a second. Okay, hold on for a second. So how can she be counted as one of the? So she can be counted as one of the 10. So you can say that the rest of the Jews outside the royal compound didn't know. They didn't know who Queen Esther was, and no one could spill and give away the secret. That's the key point. If it's Esther and it's 7 girls, and it's Mordecai and it's Daniel and all this, they could keep their mouth shut. They didn't tell the others. Because obviously, a major point of the Esther story is not to tell that she's Jewish. That's like a major point of the story.
Do they see the actual act, the mice itself? Or
No,
just
it's
know that
well.
That's good
If
enough?
they live
That's
together,
it's without well the note
Could have been off.
it's true for Farhasia that's good enough. To get a conviction,
That's
I won't
something
go. Yeah, I won't go.
That would be a
You have to see.
That would be
Zimri,
a
it's
kasha.
close enough to see
That's
that.
They treat right. I mean, you need a triple X.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a kasha and tosfos.
What's a kashantosis?
If you have 2 that keep a secret, 9 that keep a secret because divorced.
If 2 could keep a secret,
9 can keep a secret, 10 can keep a secret. You could divorce them with a call.
They weren't men. You need 2 men.
no. What do you mean? I guess.
If you have people who keep a secret,
Yeah.
Hasach, Danielle.
Yeah, but you couldn't trust anybody to do that. Oh, you mean that's a good one. Why didn't you get Hasach and
Men,
Daniel to do
men,
the
men,
thing?
men,
a
Aiden,
son-
men.
No,
No,
that's
He's in men,
because
because
the
you don't
suck was-
have 9
The
men.
suck was a
No,
Saurus.
it's not a big
He
question.
was a Saurus.
It's not- Well, okay.
So I'll say Daniel was, right?
Yeah, well, if it's not Daniel. Now you have your part. I'm serious. That's actually very interesting. I didn't think
You don't
about that.
have, you don't have 2 men from those
You do
9.
have 2
Well,
men.
if
Who? Mordechai and?
You're a sucker, Daniel, maybe?
Oh, you want to say they're 2 separate people?
Hold on for a minute. Hold on for a second.
Not necessarily.
Hold on for a second.
Before you count
Hold
them
on
as
for a
one.
second. Hold on for a
If
second.
it wasn't
Hold on for
Daniel,
a
it
second.
wasn't Jewish.
Hold on for a second. Right? Now there's possibilities in all those directions. That's actually an interesting way of looking at it. But I'm going to finish the way I had it. So you can say that the rest of the Jews didn't know what was going on. They didn't know who Queen Esther was, and nobody could squeal and give away the secret. Which is why Haman never found out during his 5 years in office and never took steps to neutralize Esther, which he could have done, as he did to Vashti and probably Hasach, if you go by Rashi, who killed him, bumped him up. So Haman knew how to get rid of the people that was in his way. The secrecy was so successful that Haman was caught off guard, and even the king didn't know, and Mordechai was their cousin, until after the hanging of Haman. Because it says, it's based on Yehudi, Mordechai Bolifnei Amelch, Ki Higido Esther Mahulah. So only after the hanging of Haman does Esther come out with the news that this is her husband or cousin, whatever she said.
Not her husband.
Probably your cousin.
You're right. So anyway, the point's like this. She was Esther, Caesar. She knew how to keep her mouth shut. Because she didn't talk until the coast was mamish clear after 5 years.
Like
Think
her
about
Danish
that.
show.
Right? There are 2 problems with this scenario, as Habermauer said. There are 2 problems with this scenario. First of all, one in general is the Medrash Lakavto says that Mordechai had a base Medrash to Shushan Abira. I know you don't have to go with it, but anyway, and there are stories in the Gemara about Mordechai teaching Kamisa to the students and all this stuff. You know, so the students must have known this was Adasa.
What? Why? They're children. Why would you say
Maybe, so that's it. If they're young.
Two
So
different,
I said,
no.
no, so I said.
In the Gemara it says his Talmidim, another place it said the Medrash says it was children's.
Yeah,
It's the same group.
The only explanation I can think of is they were very young students, like you said.
But no, but even if they're adults, she's not going to tell them what's going on, everything in his private life.
So you'd have to say that he started the yeshiva after she became the queen. You know, doesn't sound like that. They don't. You wouldn't know.
They weren't. He wasn't the Rebbe that somebody's got Rishar's Bakodesh.
I don't know. I mean, if he was their teacher, they wouldn't know that he got married. I mean,
There were 22,000.
it is true that when I was in TA in the 7th grade, or whatever it was, Rabbi Bloomberg disappeared for a year. That's what he had in the first year. He disappeared for a week. He had no idea what the heck was going on. Came back a week later, he was married. You know,
Oh, but he told you he was married.
after he came back. I'm
Right.
simply saying it's possible. You
He
know,
was the Av Bezdin also.
but we were pretty stupid. You know?
Yeah, really.
What?
He was the Av Bezdin.
First of all, it doesn't say anywhere he was on business. It doesn't say anywhere he was on business. It just say, the most you can say is that he had been in the Yoshi Lishkas Agazis.
Right.
Which is why. That's all we can say.
He knew 70 languages, so he
Yes,
obviously.
We don't know. Maybe it was a lower in the totem pole. I mean, it doesn't say it was out bad or anything like that. You see some of these from interpretations.
the title,
It doesn't say anywhere he was a
But he was
God.
with the Sanhedrin.
He doesn't say anywhere he was a God Lador. I mean, he was obviously a big person. I'm just saying it doesn't actually say those things. Now, anyway, I can think of another possibility also. There's a debate in the Gemara, like you were saying before, who is a Hasach? Amrav, Hasach Zed Daniel, V'namar Krishmo, Shechatchu Migdulaso. So one shot is Hasach is identical with Daniel, and by this time he had been demoted. So that would be reflective of the fact that what's a guy like Daniel being the servant and whipping boy of Esther? Daniel had been top dog. Right, exactly. In the previous reign under Darius, he was on the council of 3, with one of the 3 top dogs. And the only reason they threw him in the lion's den was because the king wanted to put him as number 1. And by the time the story of the lion's den is over, he was number 1. So if he's El Primo, you know, what's he working for Esther for? So, all right, you can learn like that. Shmuel Amar should call the Malchus Neftav and Alpif, that he still had influence. All the matters of kingdom. Now, are Rav and Shmuel debating about the same person, namely Daniel? Or is Rav saying Hasach is Daniel and Shmuel saying he's not Daniel? Right? You can learn it both ways. For what it's worth, the Maral says the latter. That Rav identifies Hasach with Daniel and Shmuel does not. In which case he got 10 people. Right? That's all. So Hasach, in addition to Daniel, would be the 10th person, you know, to come with the other thing, make him for Hesia. Maybe.
If he's not Hasach, how do you know he's even there?
What do you mean by that?
Where's Daniel? He says in the whole.
How do you know Daniel's there if he's not Hasach? I mean,
That's a good point. Okay,
And how do you know Hasach is Jewish?
that's
how do you know he's there?
No. You're right. That's a fair point. But there is a Tosfos that says Memuchan was identical to Daniel. Remember that? You remember? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
It's one of those little Tosfos that was aside.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's why he wanted to speak his language.
That's why he took down Vashti.
Shouldn't speak the language.
He was waiting.
Neil did that?
Yeah, that's what it says. He said he was married.
Oh, because of the Nebuchadnezzar yet from
Well, it
Babel.
says in the Tosfos he was married to his Goyish wife, and he couldn't make her speak his language. Okay, so therefore he engineered matters that the king should give an order that all the wives should speak the language of their husband.
This is getting
I didn't make it. He thinks I'm kidding. I couldn't make. First of all, I could make it up, but I'm not. I could make it up, but I'm not.
Three different people.
It's one of these little.
How many people is this Daniel?
He's Persian, you get a lot of people.
It's, no, it's where is it?
He was really Esther.
Vayamar Memuchan.
What was that? Haman was what?
Probably like 3 days or something.
Yeah, it should be here.
Never see them in the
It should
room
be
at the
here.
same time.
Memuchan. This is. Listen to this. This is a Tosfos. I didn't make this up. This is a Tosfos. A little one. It's a little one, right? And Tosfos says Yesh Medrash. So okay, it ain't Pasuk Shot at all. Yesh Medrash said Haya Daniel. That Memuchan, when he says kill Vashti, Haya Daniel. Lefisha Haya Nasi Lesarit. Shows Yigdom Yimena. He had married a Goyish wife, a Persian princess, who was higher than him. And he could never, because she was from more chashuv a background than he was, so he wanted to speak Hebrew. She wanted to speak German. Yoad Flasses came. Right? There's a medrash like that. And since I have one of these fancy Gemaras now, the medrash is in Pikr Blesser. And it's also in Targum Sheni, Esther, Aleph, Tesva, Zion.
I'm saying, well, praying to the lesbians, that's big stuff.
Yeah, I'm just saying, so in other words, it's not out of nowhere. Now, Mark is not wrong where you get Daniel from. Well, let's just throw Daniel for handicap purposes. Okay. Now, the second, look, I want to tell you something. If we come up with 9, you tell me there's 9 people. You know it's got to be 10. It's got to be. It can't be 9. It's got to be 10. It's got to be 10.
What about Mordecai?
What?
Mordecai.
He was one of the 10. It's Esther, it's Mordecai, it's 7 girls, and 1 more. Right? So the question is, what, Esther, Mordecai, 7 girls, and 1 more.
Mordecai's wife.
Yeah, right, exactly, right. Hell, the Chumash, right? First of all, you're gonna really laugh at what I'm about to say. I shouldn't even
We're
say
laughing
it.
before.
I shouldn't even say it. There's a Hasidic source that's
Hey.
there's a Hasidic source, the shade.
Yeah, Zohar says it.
Shade. Right? You know what I'm talking about? Because Zohar says, like the Socinians say about Yashka, it wasn't really Esther, it was really a shade. You understand?
Yeah,
In which
Zohar
case,
says
the whole, there's only a problem with that.
Right, at that point. Right. There's until
A little
they didn't
point.
want the idea that she should be Nikmat.
If
Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't.
Haman was an Evid Kanani, he probably had another Evid Kanani. It's a Geras.
good or bad.
It didn't say an Evid can't be one.
You just said before.
Avodah could be one thing. That's good. Okay, you can learn like that.
They don't want
Not bad.
Moshe to be nursing from a
Look, I
Goyish.
want to tell you something.
They don't want
I want
Esther
to tell you
to be Hillel
something. I'll tell you something. You guys make up your own material for your thing. And I don't mean that to be funny.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't. That's a fair point. No, I'm serious. He says, "Can I have it? Can I have another? Can I?" It could be. On the other hand, if I wanted to counter that, I would say like this: You think Mordecai was stupid? He let his Avodim know that he's married to this, and they would keep their mouth shut. Avodim generally can't keep their mouth shut. You understand? I mean, the slave really yak.
Also,
You understand?
Haman wasn't an
The
Evid
7
Canaan.
girls was a special case.
Not true.
They
He was
were
his Evid,
tight
but
with
not
her.
an Evid
They
Canaan.
were tight with her.
What?
For Evid Kanani, they could be Mal and
Doesn't say Haggai knew.
Did he make Haman Mal?
It's not clear what he gave her, but the whole story of Haggai, giving her different food is very unclear. But I'm not
Okay,
going to do that.
but if she,
First of all, if he gave her ham, he certainly didn't know. If he gave her kosher food, maybe he knew. If he gave her vegetables, that means she asked for vegetables, like I did on the podcast.
Why isn't it to go?
It's one of the things they talk about, Joseph. I'm always convinced. It's a long. You must have seen it. It's a nice It's a kosher like a template. It's very famous toast. Even Lemenger knows it. Rabbeinu Tom was there. Must have been. Anyhow, whatever the case is. Oh, hi, I didn't see you. Hi, how are you? We're talking about another man a couple of days. I want to tell you something. It's a school. You come here, you get married within a year. You know.
Can I
Anyhow,
mention this to my wife?
Your wife now?
if her name is Esther, you know,
And Ethel, it's like close enough.
then you can't.
All right.
Then you can't. The second problem, which is what Maurer said, the second problem is like this. The Gemara says, Ma'ra Esther shezim l'haman. Right? One of the questions.
I didn't hear what you said.
I will say it
Why
again.
did Esther invite Haman?
Right. Why is it that Esther invited Haman alone to the party?
Zimna, okay, fine.
Right? And the Gemara's like 10 answers. They're all very cute, you know, they're very interesting. They're all very interesting. And at the end, the answer is, Eliyahu says they were all true. In other words, Esther was playing with
She was
10
playing four-dimensional chess.
Right, exactly. She was playing 10 chess games at the same time. Right? She was under tremendous pressure, and she had the cheshbon like this, and she was a hero. You understand? She was a hero. So the Gemara said like this.
We need
Ma'ra
music to
Esther-
go with this. We need music to go with this.
Yeah, okay.
After.
So Ma'ra Esther says,
After.
why she invite Haman? So one of the reasons is, Rabbi Yehuda, I guess, Shelo Yomer Yisrael, Achos Yesh Lana Bebeis HaMelech V'yasichu Daitim Min HaRachmim. That the Jews shouldn't say like this. We don't have to work for Israel. You got Ivanka. Yeah, you got Jared. You already have people in the White House. Which is true, by the way. Ira gave me the book from this guy, David
Sledgehammer.
Yeah, exactly. Sledgehammer. So, you know, sledgehammer. So the point is,
That's
what-
Sledgehammer.
Gentlemen.
anyhow, whatever the case is, the point's like this. They won't daven. They'll say, what do we got to, you know, Esther will do her. So in other words, so the point's like this. So if they hear that she's butting up to Haman, then they'll say, oh, she's one of these Jews, BDS. You understand? She's doing the bad side.
J Street.
Right. According to this, the Jews in Shushan knew that she's a Jewish, because he's talking about the Jews over there. So what happened to the secret to her anonymity? The answer goes as follows, I think. Until Haman issued his decree, which was a long time, Esther's identity indeed remained hidden. At that point, in other words, once the Holocaust decree came out, Mordechai told her she had to plead for the Jews from the king, clearly implying she had to come on Achashverosh, which was majorly humiliating to her. She was a pious woman. She reluctantly said she'll do it, but only if the Jews in Shushan proper would assemble and pray together as a community for the success of her efforts. She says, "V'tzumu olai." Right? Allah means I need your help. You
Just said
gotta,
Vitsum.
I'll do my part. You got to step up. You do your part. In other words, she told Mordechai to abandon his loner policy, engage with the Jews across the river, inform them of the situation, namely that Queen Esther is actually Hadassah. She's been living with the king in a Karka Olam situation for 5 years now, and now emergency circumstances required her to abandon Karka Olam and to come on to the king. And Mordechai was now to lead them in prayer while fasting. That's what it boils down to, okay? Now, I would like to point out that Karka Olam doesn't mean she had to be dragged and literally raped repeatedly for 5 years, which is the way Rashi learns it. Okay? Ramban says in Milchemes Hashem that the Karka Olam simply doesn't mean that she was immobile, it means she was helpless, utterly helpless, and she didn't have to resist. I got this from his book, from the thing.
Where did I know from where? What's the source?
It's in Milchemes Hashem, but it's in the
So we said
Masifta.
like by Shabbat, she was
Listen. Shitas Ramban, he Shakiv Sheni Shicholim Noas Anas Milivolosa, Shiyachal Akufa Ladavar, the Anos, the bad guy could do it. Vav Laman O Milhomi Sasatzma, he could even prevent him from killing himself. Ein Chayavis from serious nefesh. So she was in a situation of total helplessness, which is true. She was in a situation of total helplessness. There's no question about that. All right? And therefore,
The point is, she doesn't have to be immobile. That's
right.
the point.
So, which is a different thing. So, in practical terms, she would have. Listen, the Esther story is a tragedy. It has positive parts too, but it has tragic parts, right? She was at his beck and call for 5 years all the time, even though she never initiated anything. So here we are in the story when the day before Erev Pesach, the day of B'dikas Chametz, okay, when Mordechai and Esther learned about Haman's decree that had just been sent out, because that's the scenario.
Right.
That when they found out, it was the day before. So in other words, it's the 14th. You know, in other words, that night is going to be B'dikas Chametz. Okay. Esther then tells Mordechai to cross the river, brief the Jews about the situation, including the fact that Esther is the queen. The king likes her even though she doesn't like him. That she's never, well, that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
She's never used the power of retracting this up to him, over him, but now he's going to try. and that Mordechai should assemble the Jews in Shushan in prayer for a 3-day fast. In other words, Erev Pesach, the first day of Pesach, and the second day of Pesach, on her behalf, that her efforts should succeed. In other words, Mordechai was now going to organize Tefillah B'Tzibur, which had never before happened in Jewish history, or almost never. If you, as far as I know, if you look through the Tanakh and you ask me the following question: when did the Jews ever get together in prayer? Which is an interesting question, you know. You don't find it, or hardly ever. Once in a blue moon, you find one of these kings in the south, in Yehuda, like Asa and Yechizkiah. They have like a revival meeting, and they promise to keep the Torah. You know, once in a blue moon, you find, rarely in the kingdom of Yehuda, not in Yisrael, of course, that you might have a king who said, let's try again and be mechazik ourselves and promise not to do idols anymore, and so on. I know it only lasted 5 minutes, but at least, you know, there was a public meeting. One thinks, for example, of Yehoshaphat, when he was attacked by surprise attack by 3 Arab armies. They freaked out and they get together a big public meeting, remember, and Yechazia, Yachziel, the Navi says, go out and you're going to win, and they dive their heads off, and then the Arabs all kill each other. By the time they get there, the Russians wiped out the Ukrainians wiped out the Russians. That's what
That's
ends
not
up,
politically correct,
right?
Mike.
That's what it ends up over there, and therefore they see them. By the way, the Jews, it says, comes and they see a whole belt of dead bodies, and they spend three days stripping the bodies. Okay.
What, it should go for waste?
We've heard from the voice of Chassidus. Anyway, the what? No, nothing like that whatsoever. That's with Eliyahu Hanavi and the Mount Carmel. This is in the book of Devarim, which you probably read.
No, I'm saying that's another example with it. Hashem.
Yeah, well, there's no davening there.
At mitzvah?
We do it at the end of Yom Kippur.
No, Shmuel Hanavi at Mitzvah. Yes, that's right. So that's the case. Samuel at Mitzvah, Asa, Yechizkiah. That's all I can think of. If I'm wrong, maybe there's another one. Maybe Josiah.
But those are all national levels.
David
I mean,
Shlomo-
I was just saying.
communal levels.
David Shlomo,
When do you ever find that? No, I'm saying, get what I'm saying? Not really. Unless you want to tell me, and it's not really true, then when they dedicate the base, but it's really the king doing all the talking. It's more of a, it's not like a davening. Shmuel Hanavi, you have a case where the Philistines are going to attack, and they all get a mitzvah, and they got, you know. But all I'm saying is like this.
It's unusual.
Yeah, it's funny that public prayer was foreign to Judaism, even though we consider it today an essential part. But public prayer was not part of Judaism. It's hard to imagine how they lived. You understand? What was Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur like once upon a time? But if you want to go strictly by the sources, what did a Jew do once upon a time on Rosh Hashanah? He got up in the morning, he fed the animals, they blew shofar. You know? And if you maybe 3
If
colors.
he even did, maybe only in the basement. In the basement.
No. There seems to be a.
Yechidim.
Yeah, let's say it seems to be there's an obligation, everybody. Only 9 kolas. You know, whatever. I'm simply saying they didn't have the Sana Tokif, and they certainly didn't have Shachris and Muslim, and didn't have a synagogue. That all starts in Anshe Yesek. I repeat, it starts. The beginning of. Huh?
No.
Yeah. I want to tell you something.
Buy your seat ticket.
I want to tell you something. I'm going to do something that's going to make Lee Graham say, oh, once upon a time there were no brachas. Because Anshe Yesek invented the brachas. So you could eat and drink and this and that and the other, and you don't have to make a bracha. Maybe you have to say thank you, v'chalta v'zavata.
Yeah.
I'm saying, you know, for Birchas HaMazon. But basically, thanks very much. You know, it was a good v'chalta v'zavata, rachzeh shabbat.
Rabbi, you need to drink.
Listen, that's what it was, okay? Obviously, we've changed. I get that. But the point is, at the time we're talking about, when she says, Lech Kenosis Kol Yehudim, gather everybody for a public prayer session, that was kind of a new idea. You understand? On the other hand, he said, listen, we're about to get killed over here, you know? That was a pretty good, push. You understand? That was a pretty good push. So anyway, here we are the day before Erev Pesach, and she tells him about the thing, and you got to, and basically, go organize Tefillah B'Tzibur, not with this Shemon Esrei. Go organize Tefillah B'Tzibur, Sakvay for Yusah Al Rabim. It says those words, which almost never before happened in Jewish history. Thus it was, in this specific context, that the Jews of Shushan proper, not the royal compound, discovered that Queen Esther is identical with Hadassah. Now, this must have made a variety of impressions upon the Shushan Jews. On the one hand, the situation was desperate, as the contents of Haman's decree, which had deliberately been withheld by Haman and the king, it was only discovered by Mordechai. You get it?
It was
Doesn't
sent out all over.
not to the Jews. Not to the
No, it was
Jews.
sent out to every
But
city. Every locality.
all it says is it doesn't say. Hold on for a second. All it says is Lios Hasidim La Yom Hazeh. It's exactly like Hitler. You never
It
get the
was there
words
every place.
"kill the Jews." It just says take care of the problem. You understand? Evacuate so and so many units. It's the language of banality of evil. It's very famous. All it says Lios Hasidim. What? Yeah, no, I'm saying Mordechai found out through his system. If you want to be real from, he found Ruach HaKodesh.
Right.
If you want to be less from, he found for a snitch system. You know, I mean, first of all, that you couldn't keep secret. I'm sure a guy said like this, guess what? In 12 months, you're going down, baby, you know? Something like that. All I'm saying is, when this decree must have scared them to death. Rav, in the beginning of Medrash Rabbah, which is, I always remember, Navocha gets confused. But Rav says, because the going somewhere. Rav says that that's the so basically it's like living under Hitler. Because then the pachad itself was like it's not the worst part, but it's a terrible part. The pachad they went through for 3 days was like unbelievable. Now in the end you say like this, we're having a Purim party, at the end it was okay, Mordechai triumphed, Haman was killed. They didn't know that for those 72 hours. So Rav Havi Pasach Parshas Parshas Pesach, whatever the language is, right? So in other words, they were scared out of their minds. That's why they davened. Okay? Now, on the other hand, that's one way of looking at it. The discovery that the king's favorite was none other than Hadassah, who was a from Jewish girl, must have inspired hope and even confidence. Now, hope and confidence is a good thing in general, but not when you want people to daven their heads off. Even Esther was afraid of this, because it says she invited Haman, Shelo Yasichu Daitim and Rachman. I don't want them to go easy on the davening. I want it to be a full-blooded davening. That they wouldn't really daven, she was afraid of. They would smugly rely upon the fact, Achos Yishlanu Bebeis HaMelech. That's the language of the Gemara. We have a Jewish girl on the inside, okay? Achos Yishlanu Bebeis HaMelech. And if they didn't daven for her success, she feels she would not succeed. I repeat, she didn't know that the king would be nice to her. She was going in, she says, Achas dos Lamis. She was mamish taking her life in her hands. You get it? She figured this is the last walk I'm ever taking. You have to understand that. She went through hell. Remember, she said, Uvechein avo amelcha shelo kados. Uvechein, meaning if you do your part, and you daven, Uvechein, then armed with that, I'll take my chances. Avo amelcha shelo kados. I'll go to the king against the law. She was relying on their davening. Even then it was risky, because she says, Avo amelcha shelo kados. Kasher avadati. So that's a dramatic sentence. With your prayers, I'll go in. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Kasher avadati, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Because the rules in Persia were the rules in Persia. Usually didn't break the rules. Okay? So accordingly, Esther kissed up to Haman, Gemara says, inviting him to the party along with the king and nobody else, and deliberately leaking that news. So it was court gossip. It says, Kinatu b'mel, kinatu b'sarim. One of the reasons, this was just Machiavellian, one of the reasons, how should I put it this way? If I want to make two people enemies, I'll invite him to my party, and I won't invite him. Right. And then they'll say like this, how come you got invited? I can get invited. You know? That's politics 101. So she was doing that.
Corbin and Bice.
Besides that, in general, that's good politics, divide and conquer. You get it? Believe me, if Putin could do it over again, he'd say, I would have done some preliminary work in dividing the Allies. You get it? You know, that way. He didn't calculate on this. But she did Kinati Bazar. And it says, by the way, that when the king is waking up from his sleep in the middle of the night, and he said, what happened to Mordechai? They say, you didn't do nothing for him. Lo b'nei she'oviv is Mordechai, el b'nei she'tzonim is Haman.
What's again?
Lo b'nei she'oviv is Mordechai, el b'nei she'tzonim is Haman. It worked. The reason they told the king you didn't do nothing Mordechai was to stick it to Haman. Because you mums, you got invited to the party, I didn't get invited to the party. So she was very clever in it. Now, again, that was one of her chess games. Wasn't the whole chess game. Now, she was a remarkable person. She's a remarkable person.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, you laugh at you. Let me finish. So, So basically, she kissed up to Haman, inviting him alone to the party with the king, and deliberately leaking that news, which is court gossip, so that the news crossed the river, and the Jews found out about it. She counted, clearly, on the news leading the Jews to conclude, as Mordecai had originally suspected, that she was jumping ship, that Esther was adopting a policy of saving herself, and she was going to try to lead Molly Beis Hamel, because that's the first thing Mordecai said. Right? You know, you're going to, and by the way, let me put it this way. Let's be perfectly honest. What did American Jewry do during the Holocaust?
Nothing. Kept quiet.
Molly Beis Hamel, we call Nashim. I'm saying they want to save themselves here. You know? So it's not that he had no grounds to suspect. Okay? So she figured once the Jews discovered that she was kissing, that she was inviting Haman, they would conclude that we're stuck. The only route we got to go is upstairs and not Esther. Can't rely on Ivanka anymore. You get it? You know? And so they davened their heads off, and it worked. They freaked out when they concluded that Esther had gone over to the dark side, and they davened their heads off, and sure enough, by the time they finished their 3-day fast and their 3-day davening, Haman was dead. That's how it works, because he was killed on the second day of Pesach. So they fasted on Erev Pesach, the first day of Pesach, the second day of Pesach. By the time the fast was over, the news came from the other side. Guess what?
Haman's dead.
Guess what? So it was like, wow, okay? By the way, to be sure her true identity would not leak out to the palace. During those 3 crucial days, Esther did something to divert palace attention away from the mystery of her true identity. Ma'aros Esther shezim this Haman, Kadesh le'akir she'Yehudis, and as I said before, that they should know, Kadesh le'akir, that the other clients shouldn't think she was Jewish. Meaning, by being friendly with Hitler,
There's no way that
you're right,
she's
she's probably right. You understand? They would never say maybe she's Jewish. Yeah, that was too much. Okay, so she was playing 10 chess games. She was what do you call this? Disinformation campaign, right? She ran an information campaign and a disinformation campaign, and she wasn't even in Russia.
I just want to know, do you really have written in there the dark side?
Yes, I do. Dark side. Now wait a second. The gossiping is as far as Haman's exclusive invitation to the drinking garden. Wait a second. The gossip as far as Haman's exclusive invitation to a drinking party dominated the airwaves in the palace in Shushan Abira. So Haman and his team didn't connect the dots. That suddenly, right after the Holocaust decree, he gets an unprecedented invitation from the mysterious queen whose identity is unknown. Right? He fell for it like a ton of cards. Why didn't he say like this?
Cards? Ton of bricks.
Wait a minute.
I'm drunk and I
Wait a second. All of a sudden I get it. All of a sudden after. Wait a second. All of a sudden after 5 years, I get an invitation from the queen after 5 years to come to a party, and it's right after I issued a decree to kill all the Jews. But she didn't do. He said like this. She knew him. She says, "Aflo hevi says termako kimo si sagavochar nikar Isabel." So he fell for it like a ton of.
Who's more?
ton
What?
of bricks.
Yeah, who should be more honored than me?
Yeah, right. Exactly. You know, which by the way, always works with politicians. Always works with politicians.
They shever go.
That's right. By the way, that is one of the 10
Yeah,
reasons.
yeah.
Okay, so hold on for a second. Now comes the interesting part.
Oh, until now.
Now wasn't interesting. Now comes the interesting part. What exactly caused the triumph of the Jews? Because that's what happened. Was it the efforts of Esther, or was it the tefillah b'tzibur? Okay? Or was it both? Who can tell? It's not subject to empirical verification. Well,
Scientific experiment.
Well, naturally, 2 schools of thought formed among the Jews. A and B. Team Esther and Team Prayer. Right? I mean, you can explain the whole story by giving the role of heroine to Esther, which she was. There's no question about that. After what we said, she was what she put up with and what she risked her life. I mean, she's a hero. Shein Kamo. Plus, she was a chess player. So there's no question about that. You can say the Jewish people owed their life to this famous woman. No question about that. But it's also possible to give an account, de-emphasizing that, and emphasizing the fact, Leich Knus is called Yehudim. We have tefillah b'tzibur, and it's a real tefillah, and they mean it. It's unbelievable, the powers. You get it? Which is certainly a principal belief of Judaism. Correct? Now, here's the thing. The rabbis favored the latter version. that it was the
What,
prayers.
to-
Let me finish. Rabbis favored the latter version because it's more orthodox, it's more verfrumpt, and it de-emphasizes the role of Esther, who was a woman who at the end of the day was involved in a physical relationship.
Oh, come on.
Well,
You're
they did
inspired because of that? That's the reason?
I'm saying it, let me finish. So he says,
This
the
is
rabbis,
possible.
it is more, listen, let me finish. The rabbis favored the latter version. I think,
Well said.
it's more orthodox, it's more verfrumpt, and it de-emphasizes the role of a woman who at the end of the day was involved in a physical relationship with a Gentile king.
They
no
have
matter what-
no problem with Yael Eshes Kavarakeni. They
First
have
of all,
no
she was
problem with
she was
that.
not Jewish. That's not a problem.
Asma, but she was still.
I'll tell you again, you don't appreciate, in my opinion, you don't appreciate the fact that it's very problematic from the halachic point of view to build up Esther if she ends up living with the king even afterwards. I know the reasons behind it, we just went through all that. You understand? But it's not a role model that, in my opinion,
I understand
it's
the
not a
idea.
role. It's not a role
But they
model.
acknowledge
It's
Kasher,
not a role model.
knowledge,
It's not a
knowledge
role
of
model they
tragedy.
felt. It's not a role model they felt comfortable with. Okay.
Look, afterwards, he was the guy.
Wait a
Hold
second. Hold on. Moreover,
He must have been.
don't give me the liberal stuff. Give me the conservative stuff, right?
Liberal.
Wait a minute.
Moreover, what she did, he wanted to be the guy.
Moreover,
That's how he
Keep trying.
Moreover, there's greater utility going to prayer emphasis version because it encourages others to pray. I mean, you can't exactly portray.
Everyone should be a hero.
You can't portray Esther as a role model. I don't care
Right.
what you say.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You know, she did it. Like I said, was a hero and all the rest of it. That's it. This, in my opinion, this is the tension reflected in the arguments and discord recorded in the Gemara between Esther and the rabbis.
It's about
On the one hand,
between the holidays.
right, and between Mordecai and the rabbis on the other, because Mordecai also piercing men and mixed us Sanhedrin. A lot of people didn't agree with him. Rashi says because he wasn't learning full time. That's a really sheep shot. You know, what's the reason pierced men and mixed us Sanhedrin? Now, hold on. As we know, Mordecai and Esther, which I will call Team Esther, immediately put out their version of the miracle. And that's what it says, which gives primacy to Esther and secondary importance to the prayers. Because the whole Lech Chanos unit gets one pasuk. Okay? I'm not saying, right?
It doesn't say the word prayer at all. It only says sumo.
It's true, but it says Lech Chanos call
I
you.
get that.
So it certainly implies that Sumo Lai Yalto Uvechein of
I'm not saying it in prayer. I'm just saying it doesn't even say the word.
Okay, a common religious
But
activity.
it does say that when it talks about the 48 Nevi'im and the 7 Nevi'im.
That's a Gemara. I'm not, but he's going with what the Megillah says.
But that Gemara puts Mordechai and Esther.
Yeah, okay, but you can find counter Gemara. Now, hold on for a second. As we know, Team Esther immediately put out their version of miracle, which gives primacy to Esther and secondary importance to the prayers. They pushed for their version to get accepted, writing twice.
Kisvuni Lidoros.
Writing twice, so records the Megillah. You know, there's two letters, okay? The sages were reluctant, obviously, if she has to write twice, to say the least. In the end, they did give in, perceiving divine sanction for the Esther version, at least according to the Rishalmi. It's famous, it says, Shmonim u'shmona chamisha zakenim u'shloshim kama neviim mistar mal davar zeh. The famous rabbis in those types were mistayer to notice they were really pained over adding this whole Esther thing to the canon of the Bible and the whole story. Omru, it says Eila mitzvah she Eila mitzvah nibe kacham and Moshe einovi chadash davar ad shehira kodesh baruch hu name.
What were they objecting to?
Because it says you don't want to add a new holiday. Eila mitzvah that shouldn't see Hashem. There shouldn't be nothing new. You
But they
understand?
already had.
Einovi chadash davar Mordechai v'Esther. But
they already had Megillus Tanis. They had various things that were going on.
First of all, they didn't have Megillah Sinai. This comes later.
Sure they did. No,
No,
because
but
there were various things that they
Megillah Sinai from Canaan.
The Megillah itself, with the holidays, Megillah is just documenting what the holidays were. They observed those holidays, that they broke through Yeravim and the various blockades, for instance, that they brought up Bikurim, that they smuggled in.
That's not from the
Gom
Rabban
Ve'ele,
That's not the Rabban Nevat's time. That's
fine, but it's Bias Rishon's before Esther.
No. I think they're all from Bayis Sheni.
No. I
believe so.
That I'm going to get upset about.
I believe so.
Gon Ve'eli is talking about times before.
No, I think it's
Bias.
talking about the Greeks and Romans.
You can go get the
It's talking about the time of the Greeks and Romans. But anyway, listen, I'm prepared for you to get upset. Listen, here we go. Hold on.
you so much.
Hold on for a second. Hold on for a second. Hold on for a second. The sage, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear. It's pretty clear that the sages were reluctant, to say the least, and they gave in, finding divine sanction, at least according to Yerushalmi, not the Bible. Now, but clearly, they agreed reluctantly. And as some people know, including yourself, there are opinions that Esther is not Matamas Yadayim. Okay? There were opinions out there. Esther doesn't really belong in the canon, even though this is not a proof. But Queen Esther is not in Qumran, you know, what do you call that?
Dead Sea
In the Dead Sea Scrolls. I know it's not a problem. I'm just saying. You see, in the Vaisheni, there were those who held that they shouldn't include it in there.
Meaning it was still being discussed.
I think they would have preferred a Megillah that foregrounded the public prayers. It's more the Aguda type. Probably because of the electric effect of the immediate efficacy of those prayers led to the Kim of a Kiblu effect. That must have been the most important result of the whole story to them, to the rabbis, not the saving of the Jews from the Holocaust. So it's pretty clear in the rabbinic.
That's that last sentence again, please.
In the rabbinic learning, in the Talmudic learning, the main story of Megillah comes out the Kim of a Kiblu, not the Hatzalah of the Jews. Okay. So if you're doing that, you're going to foreground the power of tefillah. That's what I think. I know it's not what you think; it's what I think. Here comes the interesting part. What was the aftermath? What was the aftermath of the triumph of the Esther narrative in the form of the holiday of Purim? We had it. No, at the end of the day, she shoved it down their throats. That's what happened. It says that. Yeah. In other words, it says Kfar Yitzhak would be made Malchi Moder Paras. You know, in other words. They didn't want it, and she did it. She said, "This is happening, guys."
Well, you had the 7 mitzvahs.
It even said, listen, it even says in the Megillah, "Well, Mamer Esther Kiyam Esther Amalkam." That's what that means. You know,
But you didn't have the 7 mitzvahs Durabanan.
So that's how it became number 7.
That's certainly how it's come up from the Durabanan of this story.
That's from later. You understand? That's what emerged from an eventual consensus. We're talking about when the Second Amendment was still up for discussion. You see? Now, I think that the reaction of the sages who opposed her efforts manifested itself in the form of the creation of Tefillah B'tzibur as institution in Judaism, because the idea of Tefillah, period, formal prayer, emerges immediately after the Purim story. It's the Anshe Tzigdolah, which Ezra and Nehemiah and Mordechai and those guys are the ones that did it, at least according to the Rambam. Is that, so I'm timing like this, even though it's a logical fallacy. Post hoc, ergo propter hoc. Is there? It happens
Translate,
like,
please.
huh?
Translate.
If it happened right after, it's probably a result of what happened before.
Causation.
Okay?
There isn't causation though.
This is a one second. Tefillah B'tzibur, we say, is a creation Anshe Kenes Agdola. Well, who's the Anshe Kenes Agdola?
It happens then. Fine.
The rabbis at the time, the Anshe Kenes Agdola is identical with the rabbis at the time of Purim.
So
Okay,
So that was
so are you telling
me? That was by the Chum Bayish Rishon, and then
Wrong.
came the Purim story. Right?
Wrong, there is no Anshe Kenes Agdola at the time of Purim by Rishon. There is none. The Anshe Kenes Agdola is formed,
Sanhedrin.
and after Ezra and the Nehemiah, these guys come later in Second Temple, which is post Purim.
So you're saying that they,
Ezra is about 10 years or so.
In fact, specifically,
after-
they call them Anshe Kenes because they're
approximately a decade or so, maybe less after Purim.
so you're
So-
saying that they did this because they didn't like the Esther book because it too much didn't emphasize the Tefillah B'tzibur
Yes.
aspect enough.
Yes, and they're gonna. And by the way, it's a very rabbinic thing. You understand? I want to get my version of Passover, so we're gonna give it over
You're doing
here.
it to
Oh, hi, how are you?
Shtacher.
Nice to see
No,
you.
you have to go that way.
That's kind of what you're saying. You're doing it a bit to Shtacher.
That's because
Yeah, well,
he says
yeah.
that to get the audience going.
Thank you
That's
very
all.
much. Oh boy, it's
To provide a counterbalance, if you want to put it more politically.
Yeah, right, right,
You
right.
like it that way, you know.
Well, I want to tell you something. To give what they would regard as a proper emphasis.
Yes.
Okay, like
I
that.
got it.
So wait a minute.
Yeah. That's why they're still saying Tehillim down at the Aguda.
Hold on for a second. To sum up,
Like a 10-hour Tehillim
to,
fest today or
to
something.
sum up,
Like that.
and believe it or not, I'm at the end. To sum up, there are 3 gigantically important events from that period in Jewish history: A, B, and C. A, Purim story, including Kimbah Kiblu. B, the abolition of the Yisrael Avodah Zarah, because that comes right at that
Why
time.
do you put that with the Purim story?
I didn't. That comes for next year. He says the.
Oh, I have to wait a whole year.
But it's
What are you serving until
But
then?
it comes at the same time.
What are you drinking until then?
Same idea. Same idea.
Yeah.
It comes at the same. It comes at the same time. So again, Purim story including Kimbah Kiblu. Number 2, the abolition of the Yitzhar for idolatry, and number 3, the creation of formal B'tzibur prayer and Tefillah B'tzibur the Amidah, the Shemon Esrei. All dates from this time. are these coincidental in time? Did they just happen to occur at the same time? Or is there a connection or indeed a cause and effect? I think, right? That, that certainly there's a clear connection between the first and the third. Even the second, but that'll take us too much time. That's for next week.
First and third.
But suffice it. In other words, there's even a connection between Kim and Kibbutz on the one hand and the abolition of the Yitzhar Avodah on the other.
Okay, but we go first and third.
But the third is the creation of Shemoneh.
Right, two weeks already out now.
I think that there's a clear connection in the first and the third. So suffice it to point out that our davening, which forces us to come together and live near each other,
In spite of everything.
days from the immediate aftermath of the Purim story, Shushan and the whole business was clearly inspired by the dramatic 3-day session in Shushan, which, as we knew, had the most unbelievable results. It is, I think, the most enduring legacy of Purim. It's become so hardwired into Jewish culture, in the Jewish brain, that we all freaked out last year during Corona. When the schools closed down, and the frum world, at the end of the day, we saw, right or wrong, could not make peace with living isolated from one another.
Right.
You saw, and Baltimore was more than other cities, they make fun of us.
Mordechai Hayashidi.
Yeah, but I'm saying,
There's a
it becomes
transition from
it's
there.
the other way around.
Right.
We no longer have the phenomenon of Mordechai Hayashidi, not really, with the rarest of exceptions. Today, to be a frum Jew, I'll tell you again, in the worst of the Corona, the Latino were still having mass weddings and things like this. And it's not simply because they're anti-law. It's in the Kishkas.
Right.
Kishkas from when? It's obviously not in the Kishkas from the first 1,000 years of Jewish history, but there was no such thing as davening. But it is in the Kishkas, as we see over here, in the aftermath of the Purim story. I am done afraid of important.
Rabbi, come on, drink something. Rabbi, drink something.
You can turn off.